Okay guys, today we're going to be making banana muffins with a crumb topping. That's what makes it really good. So I have all the ingredients set out. You're going to need about 4 different bowls. The biggest bowl is where your dry ingredients are going to go. So the first 4 ingredients are going to be 1.5 cups of flour, then 1 teaspoon of both baking soda and baking powder. Make sure you're reading the spoon correctly, and it says TSP, not TBP, okay? Because the B means tablespoon. So we need a teaspoon, and make sure you level it out. The next thing you're going to need is the salt, and that is a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And just stir it until it's combined. I already had the oven preheating at 375. I also already set up our muffin tin with the liners, and you can use any type of cooking spray so the batter doesn't get stuck to the paper. Okay. So let's move on to our wet ingredients. Okay. So I had told you all that your bananas need to be very ripened. Look at how dark these bananas are. Usually what I do is once I notice that they're starting to go bad, I will put them in the freezer, and then you can make banana bread whenever you're ready to. So let's go ahead and open it up and put it in the bowl. It gets pretty messy, guys, just so you know. This way. The next thing that you're going to add to the wet ingredients is going to be the egg and the sugar. There's the egg. And then we need 3/4 of sugar. 1, 2, 3, and that's 3/4 cup. Okay, so I am going to mix this up. We also need to add the melted butter in, and it's a 1/3 cup of melted butter. Remember, that's the key, is melting it. If you do not melt it, it's not going to come out right. It's going to be a weird mixture, and it's going to be a bread that's not right. Okay, so with 1/3, all sticks of butter will always have tablespoons listed. Okay, so 1/2 cup equals a whole stick of butter. Okay, but we only need 1/3. So it actually draws this little line here telling you where the 1/3 cup is. So you just cut it right at that line. Set the extra part aside because you're going to need some of it for later. put it in a bowl to microwave it completely melted. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and start making my crumb topping in this separate bowl right here. You're gonna need a 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Make sure you pack it down. Okay. Then you're gonna need 2 tablespoons of flour. Make sure you level it. And then 1/8 of ground cinnamon. Most people don't have the 1/8 measuring spoon, so if you have 1/4, just kind of estimate half of 1/4 of a teaspoon. Okay. So our butter should be melted. So with a fork, I'm gonna go ahead and mix this crumb topping real quick. I'm actually gonna use a spoon a little bit. So let's set this aside for now. Let me get the butter. Be careful because the butter is going to be really hot when you melt it. Notice how it was all liquid. Try to scrape out all the butter with a silicone spatula. Go ahead and mix all of this together. And I'm going to use a whisk for this. Okay. Now you are going to mix the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. Once you do this, you need to make sure that you stir it slowly, because if you stir too much or too fast, you're going to create too much protein, and that protein is called gluten. It is not bad for you unless you have celiac disease or a food allergy towards gluten. Okay. We just don't want too much gluten to form because it's going to make a really tough bread, and it's not going to be the most enjoyable to eat it. So notice how I'm just kind of moving it around. I'm not really like stirring it. I'm just combining it so I can't see the flour anymore. So any part that is still white, I'm trying to mix it into the liquid. The stirring part is the trick, okay? You can make anything really good if you know the science behind it. Be sure to like get everything from the bottom, because sometimes flour gets stuck at the very bottom. Okay. So now that is complete. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill my muffin liners up with the batter. I just need to make some space. Usually what I do is use the 1/3 cup measuring cup and just pick it up, and you can use your hands to do this, okay? You're gonna fill it up almost all the way. You're just gonna have it like about 3/4 of the way full. Do not forget that you're going to be putting a crumb topping on top of it, so that's why we don't want it all the way to the top, because then that crumb topping will fall off. The reason it's okay to touch the batter is because it's going to get put in the oven at a high temperature, and so any germs that your hands may have had, it's going to be like killed off in the oven because of the heat. So that's why we're not too concerned about it. But then after it's done baking, you shouldn't be touching it with your bare hands unless you're the one that's eating it. To get the most out of your batter, you're going to need to scrape the sides and everything, because it is a really sticky batter. It doesn't always make a whole dozen. It might make 10 muffins. It really depends on the size of the bananas that you ended up using, because if they were really small bananas, then you're gonna probably have only like 9 or 10 muffins. Try to get this stuff off. Okay, I tried my best to make 12. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. So with the crumb topping, the last thing that we need to add to it is a tablespoon of solid butter. So with this leftover, again, you need to read the lines where it says tablespoon, okay? So I'm gonna cut it there, and this is about a tablespoon. So I'm gonna put this into this crumb topping that we had already set aside. And I had mentioned a pastry blender. This is what a pastry blender looks like. So these are kind of like a bunch of knives, so you cut in the fat. That's what this is called. So because of a pastry blender, I'm going to use it because it's a lot easier. But if at home you don't have a pastry blender, what you could do is you can use 2 knives and cut it and cut it and cut it across. Okay. Before when I didn't have a pastry blender, I usually would use a fork and just squash it down. Okay. But that does take a lot more effort. So this is why I'm going to be using the pastry blender, because it's a lot easier. So you're just kind of like smashing it up, okay? And again, you can do this with butter knives. Don't do it with like a super sharp knife, okay? Because we don't want anybody getting hurt. So the reason we want this butter to be solid and not melted like earlier in the recipe is because what's going to happen to this crumb topping is the butter flakes that are in here are going to melt when it gets into the oven, and then it kind of makes this brown sugar into a kind of like candy kind of taste, because it has that fat and the sugar, and it tastes delicious, to be honest. And it's pretty easy to make too. So make sure that each of the muffins has some butter in it, okay? There we go. I usually will use a tablespoon to sprinkle it on. You may have some left over, but honestly, I just try to use it all, especially on the muffins that are a lot smaller. I'll just put more of the topping just because it's smaller. I also try to cover like every bit of batter that I see, just so the whole topping will be covering the muffin. Okay, so you can see here this made 12. These last 3 are kind of smaller, but it's not that big of a deal. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in the oven for 18 to 20 minutes. Okay guys, thanks. Hopefully it works out for you, and send pictures. Bye guys.